Welcome to the About Sex podcast. I'm your host, Angela Skirtu, and you can find me at www.therapistintlouis.com or my podcast, which you're already listening to, www.aboutsexpodcast.com. Thank you for joining me today. And so you know, I have two very interesting people on the show today who are the hosts of the podcast Cliterally Speaking. That's how I say it. Yes. And they are Emily T. Lane and Michelle Dougherty. Is it Dougherty or Dougherty? Or Dougherty?
It's Dougherty. Like
Dougherty.
Like Dougherty Ferry Road. You know?
Yeah. Well, you know, I never knew actually how to pronounce Dougherty Ferry Road. I've been calling it Dougherty.
Sounds very Irish that way.
I know, I'm very Irish. So anyhow, ladies, okay, so you guys are the podcast. You have a podcast that features honest, vulnerable, unapologetic, and funny conversations over a bottle of wine. Now, we're not doing this episode over a bottle of wine, but sounds like a lot of fun. What got you guys started in your show?
Wow. Well, thanks so much, Angela, for having us on your podcast.
Absolutely.
We're so excited about being able to, you know, talk about ourselves. I mean, we never run out of
our favorite topic.
Our favorite topic.
Who doesn't like talking about them?
Right. Right. So, so I'm Michelle Dougherty and Emily.
And I'm Emily Lane.
Emily Lane.
And I'm Emily, and we are. Go on.
Yeah. And
time for your dance number.
Right. Jazz hands. So Emily and I started Cliterally Speaking the podcast a year, 18 months, about 18 months ago. She and I were having dinner at we're having just wine at this wonderful restaurant called Fraser's in St. Louis. And we had been talking about a bunch of stuff, from dating and like sex and
camel toe,
work life and camel toe. I mean,
that's my favorite topic.
All that goes in, yeah. And I said to Emily, I said this needs to be a podcast. This information that we're sharing and laughing about and over wine, it needs to be a podcast. And she said, I absolutely. And I was like, well, and I want it to be called Cliterally Speaking the Podcast. And she says, I love it. And so then 2 days later, she showed up with a business plan, a binder full of action steps. And a week and a half later, we were in the studio recording. So
that's a pretty quick turnaround.
I tell everybody that be careful if you tell Emily Tristolane your dreams, because she will make them a reality.
Yeah. What made you want to start it, Emily? Because I mean, I know you kind of said it was a good idea for a podcast. So what attracted you to the idea?
I've been a podcast listener since before they were cool, and so I've always been a big fan of them, and I really loved the kinds of conversations that Michelle and I would have. There's so many times when I've found myself in various social settings where I'd be having conversations that felt very surface level. And I'm always hungry for the ones that either give me ideas or help change my perspective and just aren't afraid to go there. And so one of the things that I really appreciated in my friendship with Michelle was that we always went there with our conversations. And, we would be laughing so hard. I felt like I got a major ab workout that night and I just love that, I could talk about the most embarrassing things and feel like I was in a safe place to do that. And that just made me really get excited about this idea of kind of creating this community of conversation and opening. By being vulnerable ourselves, hopefully it would foster a movement to help other women feel that they can freely share amongst themselves as well.
All right. Now, before we get into this next conversation, I just want to stop to give us a word from our new sponsors. So I am now working with a really cool company called Let's Get Checked. You can find them at trilgc.com/staykinky. What's really cool about this company actually is that they're doing testosterone testing for men and hormone checks for men and women. A lot of people are struggling with hormonal imbalances and reduced testosterone levels, which really can impact your sex life. life. And so more and more men and women are trying to test their hormone levels to see how they're doing. 1 in 4 men over 30 are actually low in testosterone. Symptoms you might want to look at include fatigue, erectile dysfunction, low sex drive, anxiety, brain fog, even having a hard time making decisions, which is basically most of my client population. Just teasing. But I mean, enough of you who come see me are actually really struggling with testosterone levels and your sex drive. So what's cool about this group is you can pick from either a male hormone test kit, a female hormone test kit, or an STD test kit. And what's really cool is they send it right to you in your home. You do what you need to do to take the test. And depending on what test you use, you'll either have to do a blood sample or a blood sample and a urine sample. And then you send it back and everything's completely confidential. And basically, they deliver it to your home, they collect your sample, they review your results for you. So depending on what happens with your test, they may provide a prescription in some cases. Usually it would only be for something like if they're treating STDs. If you do end up having something longer term like hormone therapy, then you'll likely be referred to a longer term provider. But at least you'll know where you stand. So it's really cool. Your results are available and they'll be reviewed by a physician. And then a nurse will contact you for a consultation over the phone. The Let's Get Checked laboratories are CLIA approved and everything is completely anonymous. So again, that website is trylgc.com/staykinky and use the coupon code STAYKINKY to get 20% off. So you guys, I'm so interested in this title, Cliterally Speaking. So what I think is you guys are just talking about the clit all the time. Like it's clit this, clit that. So is it that or is it completely different?
So I think the title is very nuanced because it's cliterally speaking. So that's like, an essence of femininity, and honesty and joy. And there's so much more to pleasure. And there's so much more to a woman than just her clit, right? And there's so much more to explore and unravel and share than just I mean, even people mistaken so many times that the clitoris is just simple little button at the at the top of the underneath the labia or whatever. They just think that's it, but actually
it's pretty big.
It's pretty big, right? And it has
like a whole triangle.
It like goes deep in your body.
Inside. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then
some say it's the back of the G spot.
Some do, right? But
Mm-hmm.
it's a pleasure palace. It's a pleasure center. It's an entire pleasure development, right? It's not just one little hotel, right? It's a whole monopoly board.
It's all,
You just introduced it to Boardwalk and Park Place.
And do not pass go
for the vagina.
Right.
Exactly. So it's an engaging title. It's I wouldn't necessarily call it a deceiving title because we do talk about sex and we do talk about, elements
female
of
issues, right?
Female issues. Yeah. We also just talk about women, and when we're talking with our guests, we are talking about them and what makes them whole. They're more than just their job. They're more than just the thing that happened to them, and women are more than just a clitoris. And
you're telling the story. You're hearing people's stories beyond just sex. It's about what brought them here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely. And people's stories play an important role in sex. And, so I love what you say, Michelle, about it being very nuanced. I mean, I think part of our name, it's a little tongue in cheek. Part of it is to elicit a response. But in truth, it's really just about the complexity of what it is to be a woman.
Okay. Yeah. And what's funny is that when we are telling new listeners, especially new male listeners, if we we have a podcast and it's called Cliterally Speaking, they never can find it because they're trying to spell it anatomically instead of literally with a C.
Oh, interesting.
So I think that's funny that the men still can't find us.
Yeah.
Well, just like they can't find the clitoris, right?
Right.
Sometimes.
Exactly. It's consistent. They're not letting us down,
Oh God. Well, so all right, that's really interesting. So like what are some of the complex stories that you guys get to hear? And what are your own personal stories about why do you think it's so complex to be a woman? So two story questions,
Wow,
but I'm
yeah,
curious
it's
what
layered.
you guys think.
So the kinds of stories, they range all over the place. We've had stories from, very deeply intense and personal stories of, we had a conversation with Regina Sykes, who had lost her daughter. Originally when she went missing, they felt that she was probably a victim of sex trafficking. It's much harder than that. She was actually a victim of murder. And it was the whole unraveling of that story of the long search to find her daughter and the political issues that surrounded it and the discrimination and the so many layers of her story and to the resolution of finally finding her daughter several months later. We spoke with another woman, Julia Greco, who suffered from migraines, but they're constant. She, 20 plus days out of a month, she has a debilitating migraine, and it led her to this place where she was suicidal. And so it was her coming to terms with that and then her recovery from being at that dark place. Very beautiful love story entwined in there. Her husband even shared a beautifully written letter on our show that he wrote about Julia. So very, very intimate conversations. But, we also have fun. We have some recurring guests like Dr. Becky Lynn, who's an OBGYN, who's a very much an advocate for women's sexual health, especially women who are perimenopause or menopausal or postmenopause. And, we have lots of fun talking about everything from, first sexual experiences to how to keep it alive.
You talking about the person? Keep them alive.
Well, that too.
We've had, go ahead.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Well, I
Let's
was going
hear
to
from you.
say a couple other great conversations we've had are with the maker of the new Osé personal massager, Laura DiCarlo, who had won an award at the Consumer Electronics Show in January of 2019 in the robotics category. But then they rescinded it because it was immoral and profane because it was a woman's pleasure device, right? And it's a hands-free and it's customizable, and they rescinded the award, and we had her on the show. And, we don't like to take total credit because I'm sure they did a lot of work on their side. But after she was on the show, they re-awarded her. They gave it back.
Yeah, that's silly. If it was an amazing thing that she did, I don't know why I have a personal opinion that a lot of times women, I don't know, are held back in our lives randomly for weird things.
Well, it was very hypocritical because at the Consumer Electronics Show, there were life-size fuck dolls for men and porn sections that they like virtual porn. And so here is a pleasure device, an insertable pleasure device supposed to give you a blended orgasm that won for innovation in robotics and then was, immoral and profane. So I guess some people in that organization felt that women's orgasms were immoral and profane. And
which
then
is so common.
And then we had another great conversation with an author of Buzz, The History of Sex Toys. And that was absolutely fascinating. And I will remember her name in just one moment.
Hallie Lieberman.
Hallie Lieberman. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's an H. And that was fascinating.
I like how just freely she would talk about masturbation. Like for me, that is a word that I've struggled saying up until really our show. Like I've, like saying the word makes me blush. But she was just so like, oh, I've always loved masturbating and like her freeness with it. I was just like, wow, that is amazing.
Yeah, it's a great book. And St. Louis plays a little bit of history in the development of the blow-up sex doll.
Oh, really? What's the history?
So the history is there was the one of the makers of the blow up sex doll needed a focus, didn't have enough money for a focus group, but he had a friend in St. Louis, so he mailed him a prototype, and this friend came home from drinking and tried to fuck the blow up doll, and it deflated on him. Then he proceeded to beat the doll. And then he threw it out the window and almost caused a traffic accident as people are driving along like 40, and they see this like body floating through the air. Yeah. So Lewis's contribution to the blow up sex doll.
So the accidental murder of the doll. But hey, I mean, you got to learn how to use it somehow.
Hey, you got to keep that thing inflated, because otherwise they'll get upset. So.
This makes me think of a weird question, but like, do you guys feel like people are a little bit overwhelmed by female sexuality at times?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think there's a lot of fear around it, and it's just, I look at all of just globally and culturally, there all of the things that are done to repress women's sexuality within religion, within, think about, FGM, female genital mutilation, and to, prevent pleasure because, oh my God, should they actually enjoy sex? They'll become whores,
what do they think will happen? I'm really curious.
Right. Apparently some good orgasms mean they will conquer the world. I'm not exactly sure.
Well, I get good orgasms, and I do feel like I'm conquering the world, so maybe it's true.
Right.
Yeah, or maybe they'll feel like they're not needed. If women are able to pleasure themselves, give themselves blended orgasms, or be able to discuss what they want in the bedroom in a clinical manner or not, that maybe they'll think that she will realize that I suck at sex and she'll leave me and go find somebody else. So instead of me, the partner, working hard to get better at it, I will just shame her for wanting more, or shame her for thinking maybe, oh, that would be kind of fun, if we tried this position, or, oh, I saw this toy, or, oh, I'd like a toy.
It definitely comes down to, there's definitely some self-esteem issues, because I have had partners where, you're like, hey, a little to the right, and they get offended, and it's, and I would think that, they would be, well, thank God I'm not wasting my time focusing on the wrong spot, but it is a really, I think you're right, Michelle, you're hitting on something where either they feel like they're not as needed, or, but I think it's such an interesting dynamic, because think about, masturbation with men is such a, like, it's just common, they're like, oh, run one off or whatever, they're it's much more acceptable. And I certainly don't think that because that's okay for men to masturbate, that I'm so no longer going to be desired or wanted.
No, actually, don't you wish they would masturbate a little bit so then they would last longer?
Right. They build up that endurance.
They get rid of the stuff at the front, like get it out.
The pre-cum?
The pre-cum. Okay. The load that's sitting there all day long, right? Just rub that out first, and then, come back. And then you'll last longer.
Well, it's interesting. The research shows that when women are masturbating, they tend to like sex more, and it doesn't necessarily take the place of partnered sex. If anything, it adds to partnered sex, because a woman can communicate more what she likes, what her desire is, and also there's more of a feedback between in a heterosexual relationship, because not everybody's in a heterosexual relationship, but in that male-female partnership, there's more of a feedback system where he is like, so every guy that's ever been in my office says, I just want her to enjoy sex. I just want it to be a positive thing for her. So women who masturbate actually enjoy sex more because they learn what they like and they enjoy. Mm-hmm. And as a result, they're able to have more of that feedback system with their partner, which is exactly what the male wants. He doesn't want a girl that's just laying there and kind of not interested. Mm-hmm. He wants that woman who's excited about it and involved in it. But it's interesting because I feel like our culture really shuts down female sexuality. And so the very thing that these guys ask for in my office are the things that women don't feel comfortable being because they're so worried about being a whore or something. Does that make sense?
Oh, completely. You know, I think there is a lot of this cultural shame that's tied into purity and virginity. And it's like, okay, we want you to be pure and virginal, but yet you need to know how to please a man. You need to know every move, and you need to look sexy,
Be a
and
sex
act sexy.
ninja.
Right. A sex exactly.
Did it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious. We talk about, as women, we received messages on how to please a man, right? And what we need to be doing to please him. Do men get that same type of conditioning or like discussion on how to please a woman? Because if they're sitting in your office and they're saying, I just want her to be happy. Have they asked her? I mean, I don't know. How do we educate our boys and our men?
So what typically is happening is they've been educated through porn or the locker room stuff, thanks to our president who introduced that phrase. Yeah. But anyhow, so they'll either learn by kind of talking amongst themselves, or it's too taboo and they'll just watch porn. But porn is very male centric. It shows women having these wonderful orgasms essentially.
Right.
But doing only male dominated and male driven things. Like most women need clitoral stimulation to actually almost pretty much all of them. Like the real debate is that like actually even the women who are getting penis and vagina intercourse orgasms are only getting it because their clitoris there's a rule of thumb. I don't know if you guys have read the book Come As You Are. Or it's either that one or something else. But like if your clitoris is less than a thumb length away from the opening of your vagina, then you're one of the magical women who can have an orgasm during sex, but you're still having a clitoral stimulation.
Yeah. So if your clitoris is less than a thumb from the opening, less than a thumb, then then that means that even the smallest man in the world can make you happy. So perhaps those of us who don't have their clitoris right next to the vagina,
which is the majority of us, by the way.
We're holding out for something a little longer, something a little bigger. Our standards might be a little higher because we need a little more. No, I'm not. I'm just being funny right now. I'm not trying to.
I've often wondered why evolutionary.
You can have standards, Michelle.
Yeah.
Oh, thank God.
What were you saying, Emily?
Now I know my standards can have a biological and a physical basis for it, not just because I like.
Isn't it nice to have science? I love it.
Yeah.
Well, Emily, what were you
speaking
saying?
of science, I'm curious why men haven't evolved to have a little like bump of their own on their bodies right above the penis, because we could be rubbing on that and that would feel amazing. Like, why doesn't that exist?
I don't know, but you know what? You can just grind the shit out of him like this. That was my visual. You can't see that on the show, but I'm just kind of like visually showing this nasty grind. So everybody love it. No, but the truth is good. I think good male partners are ones who really do take the time to ask. And they do exist out there. And there's obviously it comes from somewhere, and I think it honestly tends to come from people who've had a lot of sex education. Are you guys, when you're talking with people, do you find that like the people you're talking to are comfortable talking about sex and sexuality, or are you still like when you're asking the stories of the people you're with that they're still even struggling to find themselves? Because I've noticed kind of a mix myself.
So it's interesting in my experience, when I've talked to people about the podcast, I have had maybe a handful that when I say the name, giggle uncomfortably and are embarrassed. And I'm thinking, gosh, you're the one who really needs to listen to my podcast, because if you're giggling and embarrassed at the name, there's so many layers in there that need to be helped released. Mm-hmm. And some men when they hear the name and they try to find it or whatever, they're thinking it's going to be all about, sex. And I thought you were going to talk about, sex more. And they're looking at, they're looking at, I mean, just some, but on the majority of the people that I've interacted with, are very open, and sometimes like over open, even when they're not on our show. They feel that they can just
that is
tell
an
us
interesting experience, isn't it?
everything.
Yeah.
Anyway, It's
yeah,
like,
it's true. I mean, we know when we have a guest on kind of what their boundaries are, and there are some people who, like, we had Portia, who is a show we had recently, Portia Anderson, before we recorded with her, she's like, ladies, I want to talk about sex. And so it was like, okay, great, and, so generally we kind of know the area of topic that we want to explore with somebody. And sometimes, we just kind of let things unfold organically. And, I think there's maybe out of all of our episodes, there's maybe one time I asked a question that had a sexual basis, and the guest was like, I'm not going to talk about that. I was like, okay, no problem. Moving on.
Oh, I love it. I feel like I get across the gamut. There's some that are like, and I'm not just talking about in my episodes, but also just in the couch, that there's some people that are really open to talking about sex, and there's other people that are like, can we say the word vagina? I was like, do you know I do this all day?
Yeah. Right.
So what are some of the topics that you guys have covered that, I know you're not just about sex, and something you had said earlier. So I'm pulling some of the things from when we talked before the show, because we had a little powwow before the show. And one thing you said is that you want to hit, did you say 8,000 nerve endings? Tell me, you were talking about this, Michelle. Tell us about the 8,000 nerve endings.
Right. So some people might not realize, but the clitoris has 8,000 nerve endings, and we intend to hit every one of those on our show. So we have, 8,000 topics or whatever. But I was blown away when I learned that the clitoris had that many nerves, which then explains the powerful orgasms, right? And how, because there's so much with it. But yeah, so some of the topics that we've talked about, again, we talked with, losing your child. We had a woman on who is a professional with young children, and that mommy shaming she gets from that we do to each other, from the women who stay at home and the women who are in the workplace and, trying to be everything. We had a phenomenal discussion with Michelle Minks, who's a pole dancer in town. She's got her own pole dancing academy, and she basically was some of the early innovators in pole dancing, and like two people on a pole. And she talked about, what it was like to growing up in her home when she went to work at the strip club, how she's made her life. Incredible. Just one of these episodes that you're just like, I'm so fortunate to have my podcast with Emily, that we get to talk to these amazing people, and we get to learn about them and become friends with them. We have discussed what it was like to leave an abusive relationship, what it was like to be married to a narcissist, what it's like to
raise a sociopathic son.
Right. What's it like to have your body start falling apart on you, and not knowing what's happening. Just pretty much, a woman, we're also unique, and so many different things happen. And I think, with 8,000 nerves to hit, we've got a long time, to.
Do you guys bring yourselves into the podcast, like your own stories?
Very much so. Yeah. We're very honest about our own personal experiences. So, we've shared our divorce stories. We've shared our very intimate personal feelings about, big changes in our lives, and, those pivotal moments. We're very raw about them. And even to the, sharing those things where it's like, I used to think this way. Thankfully, I don't anymore. And, sharing these horrible facts about ourselves from the past, and
or
yeah,
currently.
exactly.
Yeah. I mean, like
Right.
one episode, I was like, I really didn't expect this entire episode to be about my dry, dusty vagina, girls. Now, can we move on? Can we talk about something else? I'm feeling a little vulnerable now.
Right.
Well, that's what the show's about, right? Getting
exactly.
vulnerable.
Exactly. It's about vulnerability.
Yes,
It's about
vulva neurability. Yeah.
And it's conversations women have over a bottle of wine. So if you think about when you're sitting around the table with your girlfriends and the range of the conversation that you have, we want our listeners to feel like they're right there at the table with us.
It's kind of funny because I think about the range of the conversations, and it's not uncommon for a conversation to eventually end up having some sort of sex talk. Not sexy talk, but sex talk.
Where you sit each other down and you tell each other the birds and the bees.
Right. No, I mean, it's just talking about what's happening at home or not happening at home, or all those kinds of things, and I don't know. I find it really fascinating that I think that women actually talk about sex more than guys do.
I agree with you there. From what I hear is that it just seems like it's more comfortable for females to talk, but I don't think I've ever heard of like a set of guys really sitting around and being like, so when's the last time you fucked your wife? I don't know.
Right.
That's my man voice.
or the question of like, so when you go down on her, what's your favorite technique? Is that do you like to go to the left or the right? I mean, are your fingers inside her at the same time? I'm just wondering, I mean, because we'll be like, like, so how do you give head? I mean, I've never heard about that. Or, or you'll share like tips with each other. You're like, well, if you just, rub them a little bit here while you're doing this, and, you take that home and you're like, amazing. Thank you, girlfriends. Or the best advice I got one time was just play with the tip. Don't waste your time and all that shaft stuff, because your mouth is going to start hurting and your jaw, because all the nerves are up the tip. And that was like a game changer for me. I was like, I've been doing it wrong all these years. I've been trying to do like a porn person, right? Like.
Oh yeah. Well, what's interesting about that? I've actually found that a lot of my clients, that's what has turned them off to oral sex. The females is that they've been trying to do it the way they saw it in porn. And that's what they see is this deep throating thing. I love these visuals. Deep throat.
Right. Yeah.
They've been deep throating and it hurts their jaw. It hurts. It's uncomfortable. They're
Makes you
can't breathe.
gagging.
Yeah.
And actually, that's not fun at all. What are your thoughts about oral sex, Emily?
I love oral sex, quite honestly. And I think it is really fun. I mean, I love receiving it. I like giving it. I think, there's all kinds of fun things that you can do that I know elicits reactions, and that's always fun to discover. That's one of the things I like about sex is this. It's a continual exploration, and every partner is different and every time is different. Like I personally, I don't have a set process that works for me every time. Like I need things to be, shake it up a little bit. Sometimes going to the visuals, this works. Sometimes this works, it's all these different methods. So sometimes it's a little this and a little that,
Just want people to know that what she did was a cross and circles, because there's nobody watching this video.
Right.
Squares, rectangles, that's all for the clit, right? Or were you talking about penises?
No, that for the clit. Yeah. So
cool.
And I think men are probably, I don't know, the same way and enjoy different things at different times.
What do you think, Michelle? Do you like oral sex?
I do. I like, as Emily said, I also like to receive it as well as give it. I would say that for me, receiving it can can definitely be like a show of love for me, because I'm not somebody that's just going to come right away. I enjoy it. And so they'll have to like work a little longer and harder to make it happen. So if they're expecting it to happen, in 30 seconds,
20
you know,
minutes.
Yeah. No, I don't know if it's 20 minutes. I think
for me, it's 20
it
minutes.
can be 20 minutes.
I think it's important for people to share that because every woman that ever comes to me feels like they're taking too long. And it usually is 20 to 30 minutes. That's not uncommon.
Yeah. Well, and then the thing that will immediately turn me off and like, dry me up and it's all over is if they're down there and they're working and then they sigh and I feel their shoulders go down. It's like because I've read that as you're taking too long and then I can't, and I can't come after that. I'm like, never mind.
You put pressure on yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll start starting imagining other people having sex with me and not the person who is. Maybe if I think about that, I'll come sooner. Right. But as far as like, I really enjoyed it after I got divorced. And I had read this website, and I'm sure it's not anymore because it was so long ago. And it was a gay guy had described giving head, like all the techniques. And that's what I was like, I was like, oh my God, there's so many tricks and tips and how to do it. And that's where I read about not fooling around with the shaft and all the different things you could do. And I got like really good at it. So I do enjoy it. And then through my many, 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 many years of being divorced, I kind of felt sad when I would be with a new partner and I would do something that they had never had done before. And I was like, you're how old and you've never had your balls licked? And I would feel bad for that. I'm like, wow, you've gone a long time.
You've lived your whole life without ball licking. You have no idea what's out there.
Without a woman licking your balls. Wow. Well, I'm glad I gave that to you. Yeah. I'm glad I was able to.
I definitely feel like after my divorce, I kind of came into, it's funny. I always thought I was very sexual. I was I still am a sex therapist, obviously. But like after my divorce, it's like I learned so much more about sex because, you're with this one person. I was with my partner for 11 years. And I had kind of explored a little bit before then, but I don't think I really got to know at all about the different things that please me and please my partners. And so when I divorced, it was like, oh my God, I found my clitoris. I found things that I didn't even know these existed. And it was a really exciting experience for me. Emily, you said you got divorced too at some point. Did you have any divorce revelation?
Yeah. I was married for 12 years and then we were together for 4 years prior to that. So we were together for 16 years. And, I really didn't enjoy sex with him, and there's a lot of reasons for that. He really didn't care that if I was enjoying it or not, that in fact, I remember his like number one sales pitch to me to try and convince me to have sex would be, I promise it'll be quick. And like, it's the wrong pitch, I'll
just get in and get out. You won't notice at all.
Right. Except you'll be messy afterwards, in
a blink of an eye.
Right. Yeah. So for me, it was extremely awakening to move on from my partner and just realize how fun it could be, and that it didn't have to come with all this pressure.
I was most excited when another partner was able to get me off of the clitoris. Like me and my partner always kind of struggled with that. And so like I had this new boyfriend. I won't mention his name because he's not with me anymore and it'll be weird. But like I remembered he just had this magical finger thing that he did that I was like, oh my God. Like every time. And I was like, where did you learn that? And he's like, well, when I was younger, I dated older women. And that was very interesting because as I started to explore with different partners, here's the answer to the question from earlier in the show. It's that men who learn how to please women date older women when they're younger. Because quite a few of them mentioned that to me. And they were women who had like over 30, over 40. They were comfortable in their skin and they told them exactly what they wanted and they didn't have time to waste.
Right.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
That's how they learn.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
or they're short. If it's a short man, then he has a lot to prove.
Oh, I have experienced. I had a partner once that was quite short, but man, oh man, he was really hung. He was well endowed, which I
But
didn't
was he good in
expect.
bed? Because my theory is when they're
Very.
short. Okay, good.
Yeah, very good. So,
Interesting.
yeah.
Okay. So it checks out. What about you,
Does-
Michelle? Is my storyline going or no?
So I was married for actually by the time our divorce was final, we had been married for 12 years, but he left after 10 years. And so I've been single now for 16, going on 17 years, a long time. And I found that I was fortunate that one of my first partners post divorce was a quite giving lover. And I didn't know, I think there were times I would cry in bed because I had never had that much of enjoyment and taking away layers and layers of shame, because I love to make out and I loved sex, but I think after being with one person and married and kids and all those things, and it just, I knew my
Lose
ex.
yourself.
Yeah. And I knew that my ex wanted to have sex was when he would mow the lawn and he would look at me and like, look at me, I'm mowing the lawn. Look at me, I'm taking the trash out.
I did something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I would be like, all right, I guess I'll go fix me a drink so I can make sure I'm ready for, I can get through it later. So it was.
This is the exchange. You mow the lawn, I fuck you. Let's go.
yeah. But it wasn't an exchange that we had entered into together. Like, oh, hey, if you'll mow the lawn, I'll fuck you. It was more like, now it's expected of me. And so, it just wasn't, at the end of the day, that's why we're divorced, right? The compatibility wasn't there for a number of reasons.
I think a lot of women, though, like part of why marriage sex can be kind of tough. So I call marriage sex prison sex. It's a joke, but like because it feels that way over time, like you're cellmates, right?
Yeah.
And like I think it's because of that expectation. Like there become these weird expectations where it's not about I want to do this. It's that I have to, or you're going to get pissed at me.
Obligatory sex.
I hate obligatory sex.
Yes. I know.
I hope if we do one thing in our podcasts is if we can go ahead and get rid of that term, your wifely duty.
Right.
We can just eliminate that from the vernacular so that the women and the young ladies and, growing up and getting married, they will never feel that they have to do their wifely duty.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that. Yeah.
I would hear it from the older generation. Oh, I just hated it when I would have to do my wifely duty. And I think about all those years of all those women that had just really shitty sex,
Mm-hmm.
And
I think a lot of them just cheated on their husbands, actually.
Really?
Yeah, well, that's another weird topic. But, I do a lot of infidelity work. So my guess is if any of them got good sex, it probably was outside of marriage.
Yeah.
Because, like the wifely duty, that obligatory thing just makes it's no fun. It makes it feel just like pressure and annoying. And I don't know about you guys, but I was talking to my friend earlier about this, and there was this period at the end of the marriage where I kind of didn't want to have sex at all anymore. And I feel like my vagina just shut down entirely. Like it was just like, nah, not going, not doing it. And I've been lately asking some of my clients, like, if they feel like they're getting close to the edge of like, should we stay or should we go? I'll ask, like, are you guys enjoying sex or does it feel like you're kind of raping yourself? And I know it's a weird, crass question, but like a lot of them, it makes sense to them because it's like, yeah, it does. It feels kind of like I have to consent to this, but I'm not, and I'm not enjoying it. And so like, I'm just there, but I'm not.
Yeah, I have a friend who said the last time she had sex with her husband before they divorced, she said it felt like he was raping her. She was so checked out of the marriage, didn't want to be there, and she still she considers it a rape, because it was not something that she wanted. And I just think about how many women, all the generations before us who had to endure that kind of stuff, and if we can, in a small way, help prevent, a percentage. I know we're not going to get 100%, but if we can help some and realize.
Yeah, we've talked quite a bit about the gray areas behind consent, and there's the obvious yes and no's, but there's the, if hounding somebody for 2 hours to have sex with you and then they finally give in and have sex with you, that was not a yes. Just because they said yes to stop the hounding and just get past that moment, that's still not a yes. And I think that there's so many instances that are on that scale, that I think there needs to be more conversation around that. It's not okay to pressure somebody into it. It's not okay to make somebody feel obligated because you mowed the lawn. Now you have to do your wifely duty. Those are
Or bought you a meal.
yeah.
Or to
bought you a drink.
Affection.
Oh, right.
Like there can be the punishment afterwards. So like you rejected me, so I'm just not going to talk to you. Like I have times where clients like they just ignore each other for a week because he didn't, or she like, I mean, it's funny. So like, because I'm a therapist, I'm always trying to be very inclusive in my words. So it's not that it can't go both ways, but to be fair, it's more often male to female than it is female to male. It doesn't mean it can't happen, because it can. I actually have situations where the female wants to have sex and the male is not interested. He just has a lot lower desire. Maybe he struggles with ED. So like it can go both ways. So I do want to be inclusive there, but regardless, I just think, I don't know. I think we're unraveling a lot of those old concepts, like that old generation of like, this is what your wifely duty is still there. And even though it was interesting when you said it, because I'm like, I don't think I was told that necessarily, but I still have that sense of, well, I better do this or the whole marriage is going to fall apart.
Right. Up in flames.
Right?
Yeah.
I better do this or he's going to pout for 4 days. And I already got kids to take care of. I don't need to deal with a grown ass man pouting all the time because he didn't get his rocks off, because too many times, partners later as things are unraveling and, divorce really is going to happen unless for some miracle they, are able to find their way back to each other. I do that all the time. I end up with like too much of a qualifying sentence, but then I forget my point.
What am I talking about? Too many times is what you said.
I know. Too many times. It ends up being where thank you very much came back to me, where the partner, whether it's you or if you're on you just feel like a receptacle. You're not, all you are is a body to them. You're just a vagina,
a cum dumpster,
a cum dumpster, for them.
My grandmother used to call it being a dump bucket. She called sex being a dump bucket.
Yeah. I've
Isn't
heard
that
you're
terrible?
Just masturbating inside me,
Right.
Like I've heard all the worst.
I mean, because if you think about it, I mean, like when they do come inside you, they're done, right? They're like done. But now you have to deal with all the rest of the stuff for however long it takes to leak out of you and all that sort of stuff if they're not, wearing a condom. And then the whole get a towel because I'm not going to sleep on the wet spot.
Oh, right.
I think it's really nice when a partner comes back to you with a paper towel.
Yeah,
like,
a warm washcloth.
A
warm washcloth or something. My ex would definitely, he would just go get a sandwich. He was like, all right,
I'm out of here.
And I'd be like, oh, okay.
Like, what am I going to do with this?
I guess I'll just change the bed. Something like that. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So
did he at least share his sandwich with you?
Oh God, no, God, no. That's fine. That's fine. So if I were to come to you as a client, I would probably identify like some trauma related to sex and food. I'd probably have to identify and unravel the PTSD around po' boy sandwiches and the thought of sex or the after sex and stuff. Yeah,
I can
PTSD. Yeah.
Every time she eats a po' boy, she's like, "No, take it away!
I've got to change my sheets."
All right, ladies,
too much on me.
Well, so we're towards the end of the podcast, and I just wanted to thank you guys for being on. It's been very fun. I feel like we've gone through quite a few topics. I'm like,
I
what happened
know.
here? But
It's
anyhow,
been
ladies,
great.
will you go ahead and plug? Tell the audience how do they find you if they want to watch your podcast or listen to it or both?
Yeah. So we have a website, cliterallyspeakingpodcast.com. And of course, we have, you can basically download our podcast anywhere and everywhere podcasts are downloadable. And we also have a YouTube channel, which is where you can watch it if you prefer to see all the hand gestures that we make while we're talking. We also have a monthly, a time of the month show that's a 1 hour on Facebook. It's the last Wednesday of the month. And we do that usually around 8 to 9 p.m. And it's just a fun way to engage with our audience.
Yeah. Yeah. As we say, our time of the month should only last an hour and it should always be on the last Wednesday, So we like to joke about that. And we've had some fun times on that, on our time of the month show. And you can see back episodes if you want, also on our Facebook page. We also have Instagram. Mm-hmm. And Emily does a phenomenal job with our Instagram account.
Yep, we have a little fun with that.
Yeah.
For people who can't spell it, how do you spell cliterally speaking?
Literally,
you guys can
with
spell
a C.
speaking.
Yeah, so it's the word literally. That's LITERALLY. And then you just add a C in the front. So it's Cliterally Speaking the Podcast. You can reach us. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was agreeing with you.
Oh, sure. I was like, you can email us at cliterallyspeakingpodcast@gmail.com. And then one of the initiatives Emily and I have, along with our friend, Dr. Becky Lynn, is prior to the Corona times, and hopefully we'll be able to get this back once after the quarantine, we do adult bedtime stories. And that is adult sex education with erotic readings and Q&A time. So that is ticketed events and lots of sharing, lots of discussion, and it's really good. We've enjoyed our adult bedtime stories.
That sounds really fun. Well, I thank you again for both of you joining me. And of course, those of you who are listening, you can find me at www.therapistinstlouis.com or www.aboutsexpodcast.com. Thank you for listening and stay kinky, St. Louis.